Hello, everyone. Tim K here, host of the Veterans Project podcast, founder of the Veterans Project, and founder of the Caregiver Project as well, to talk to you about a very close friend and Red Friday partner of ours, the Mississippi Coffee Lady. Joy Rogers is a Starkville native, Marine Corps officer's wife, and is the founder of the Mississippi Coffee Lady. She is a talented roaster who also loves our troops and caregivers and understands the importance of sharing our legacies. Now, Joy knows without capturing those legacies, we lose the importance of our men and women who so bravely served overseas and on the home front. So, if you buy a bag of her artisan roasts on Red Friday, she gives every single penny to the projects. That's right. Every bit of that sale goes to the projects and ensures our lives and legacies are never forgotten. Now, I brought up the importance time and time again of hashtag one person. It takes one person realizing the importance of both the Veterans Project and the Caregiver Project to create a positive impact in our storytelling community. When you get behind our cause and purchase a bag of coffee on Friday, you benefit the project. It's simple as that. And she's doing a giveaway every Friday as well. Simply share your favorite project from the Veterans Project and the Caregiver Project via Instagram or our Facebook, and you have a chance to win a bag of her beautifully handcrafted roasts. So what do you say? Just head over to the MississippiCoffeeLady.com on Red Friday, buy a bag, and support the project. Easy as that. When you think of rural Mississippi, your first thoughts might not immediately take you to the arts. But that's the problem with stereotypes. Although some of those cliches may have a theoretical foundation in some truth, there are so many issues with generalizing a certain region or demographic people group. Mississippi may be known by many for its lack of solid public education, issues with racial tension, or non-progressive leanings. But the truth is, it is a place full of cultural icons. Morgan Freeman, Elvis Presley, B.B. King, Oprah Winfrey, James Earl Jones, Ike Turner, Britney Spears, Faith Hill, even Diplo, and that's just to mention a few. There's something special about the cultural melting pot that's made Mississippi what it is, a birthplace of modern music and foundational to the creative arts in many ways. Our next guest is another example of the problems with stereotyping Mississippians. In fact, his whole family is as well. You might remember one of our guests, Jacob Phillips, an incredible artist in his own right and one of my best friends. His brother, Jacob Phillips, served as a captain in the United States Army and deployed to Iraq. His service to his country is a usual marker for the servant-minded attitude of the Phillips household, but so was his path in the arts. He didn't follow the most conventional route to get there, but now his vocal talents have taken him to television sets around the world, with appearances on Sunday Night Football, the NFL Hall of Fame, commercials for Infinity, Snap-on, Jim Beam, the Special Olympics, and Mossy Oak. Still, if you spoke to Jacob in person, he'd probably fail to mention any of this. Instead, speaking about the resilient love of his father, who tragically passed after a battle with cancer some years ago, and a faith in Christ that defines his journey on this earth. You've heard him in our intros and outros on every single podcast. Here he is, the very talented Jacob Phillips.
The Veterans Project is a comprehensive essay capturing the legacies of our warfighters, caregivers, and civilians who have stepped forward in defense of our patriotic principles in an effort to capture their stories and to never forget the staggering sacrifices of our nation's finest. This is the Veterans Project podcast, where our legacies are the mission. Here's your host, Tim K.
Welcome to the Veterans Project podcast. My name is Tim K, and I am your host as always. We have the beautiful, the incredible, he just laughed.
Let's cut to the chase.
Jacob, I know, I was just going to carry this on for a long time here. Captain Jacob Phillips on the show. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
So Jake and I, just to give a little background, we're really good friends. Well, I say we are. He's smiling right now. I don't really know. Debatable. But Jake and I are really good friends. We actually met at Sundance when I had a gallery there, obviously, with Jesse Phillips, his brother, who was on the podcast a couple days ago. Incredible Marine, great guy, great artist, very talented artist. Well, I meet his brother, and he's like, "You're going to like my brother, I can already tell." And this 6'4"?
6'5" and a quarter.
6'5" and a quarter. man walks in. He just has this commanding presence. But what I'm struck by the most is he was just super kind right away. And that humility extended itself to everybody in the circle. And one of the things I noticed, I really want to compliment you on, Jake, was immediately you had this way where I could tell you would find the guys. You reminded me of Nate in that regard, Nate Boyer, and that you would find people.
Oh, high praise.
Yeah, it is very high praise.
And I mean that. I say that in a silly way, but
of course.
I mean that.
Well, I say that's debatable, but knowing Nate. But, you in that circle, man, were just like looking for the people that, you could tell them didn't matter as much to others, right? And you were in those corners talking to them and seeing who was, not necessarily the VIP or celebrity in the area. And I noticed that about you immediately from talking to the people at the bar who were bringing up drinks, or just you immediately were in other circles. And I admired that about you. So, Jake, I just want to say, glad to be your friend. Glad to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about life.
Let's do it.
What gave you that sense of humility? Like, you talking to others in those circles, what is that an extension of? Is that how you were raised?
I think a big part of that is my dad, who is, he passed away in 2013. I guess I was 29 at the time. But he always taught me a Bible verse, and it's, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Treat everyone how you would like to be treated. And I grew up being, told to be thoughtful. You need to be thoughtful of others, that kind of thing. So I think that was instilled in me from a child. And then I'm from a big family. So it's very hard to be extremely selfish and thrive in a big family. You kind of just have to, even if you don't like it, you're going to have to learn to share. And, you don't get the last piece of cake necessarily. You might have to cut it into 10 parts, that kind of thing.
Literally 10 parts for your family, yeah.
So part of it was instilled, and then part of it is out of necessity, I suppose. But I don't think anyone is, I think everyone's a sinner. I don't think anyone is just really, maybe it's easier on some people, but everyone's going to have to work to be thoughtful of others. Most people are pretty selfish.
And you'll notice that especially in some of those art circles, not to hate on anybody in those particular circles that we were at in Sundance and all that, but it's just part of kind of the crowd. It's like, well, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? It's a constant comparison game. And I remember even being with Jesse and a little bit kind of, yes, fair to say, annoyed by the climate. It's art, and I've been around it for a while now. It's very pretentious, but you're an artist yourself, and I didn't know at the time that you were an artist. So I was just like, oh, this guy's a cool older brother. He's coming in. He's Army, so he's way wiser than Marine. So true. And by the way, the cool thing about this podcast is we can make fun of the Marine Corps as much as we want. And, and so one of the things that, I know I talked to you about right away was, your feelings on art. And I was struck by some of your wisdom and some of the things that you mentioned. But you were working at...
I was in manufacturing. I was working in a tire.
Right.
I was a supervisor in a tire factory. And
what was that job like?
It was my team was really good. Mm-hmm. I was a warehouse supervisor. So we worked in the warehouse, but then had some stuff in production. The management was terrible, and I had a good boss. Thankfully, he was kind of a crap umbrella, so that's why I stayed as long as I did. But it reminded me of being in the Army with I was an officer in the Army, and turns out I don't like officers. So,
which means that you're the best possible officer.
Well,
automatically.
I was not often popular with the field grades because I wouldn't whore my men out to details just to get a wink and a nod from the commander. No, we've been working all day. We've been on this cycle. My guys need a rest. Well, you're not a team player. Well, maybe not to you. I think the guys will appreciate a little time, off instead of going right back into whatever you're trying to get them to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, it reminded me a lot where I was of that kind of just the politics. And going back, you were talking about artists, leaders, or I say leaders, people and managers.
Yeah.
I think leaders has a connotation of someone that's likable, charismatic, they care about people. someone can be in a leadership position and not be a leader, obviously. But a lot of managers, and it was just terrible. It was inside. The job was inside, sort of a soul squishing kind of a.
That's exactly the words I was going to use.
Yeah,
soul sucking,
existence.
Yeah.
So I would. One of the things I would do, I was, I had this warehouse, and it's, a little block office in there. So, but also was over the rail yards. We had a lot of, railroad cars coming in with our raw materials on it. So a lot of times I would go out there, and I would have monologues from Shakespeare or something, and I would just practice voices while I'm walking around checking the cars, making sure we've got. I mean, I was working, checking serial numbers. But
hey, dude, you can be honest now. You don't work for them.
But no, that it was bad in most ways. The only thing that I miss is the guys on my team. That's the only thing I miss about that place.
That sense of camaraderie extending itself off of your Army career, right? Like that brotherhood, the teamwork, the grouping of the community is a very powerful thing. Even in that industry, being around it, you can miss that, right? Like it's possible. But you said a few things that I really want to play off of. I like, art. You were out there dreaming of Shakespeare, of some of the great poets, some of the great authors. It was in you. It was already in your bloodstream. Where did that come from?
I've always liked voice actors, and I've always liked movies and good music and things like that. But when I was in the Army, I was an XO. It was in Garrison, but I mean, that was so awful. I had an absolute blankety blank of a commander who didn't like to work. It was, and I mean, that's generally, the XO is a thankless job, but in this particular case, he was literally not doing his job and saying, why don't you do the XO stuff and do mine too, because I want to go over here and play golf. Or whatever. So he was a very poor leader. So my escape, I would go to a coffee shop, and I was in Fort Riley, Kansas at the time. I would go to a coffee shop in Aggieville in Manhattan, the Little Apple, and just get away. I would write poetry. I would just write short stories and just get away from the Army. I didn't want anything. I didn't want to be in the Army for, an hour. Yeah. And so.
That's cool. I didn't want to be in the Army ever.
I heard an audio book by a guy. Kenneth, what's his last name? Bran, something like that.
I think it's Bran.
Bran?
Yeah.
Amazing actor and voice actor. I heard him do The Magician's Nephew on audiobook from the C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. And I fell in love with voice acting. And I didn't really think I could do it, but I thought, that's so cool. And then later, my platoon sergeant, who I think his wife she was out of town. I've never been the party type. I don't go out to the clubs and whatnot. So he was like, hey, not meaning to be weird here, but I got a couple tickets to Romeo and Juliet at the K-State's got a great theater. So I went on a mandate with my platoon sergeant to
amazing.
Romeo and Juliet, and I can remember that's where I kind of fell in love with the idea of performing. And I thought that's really cool. So it was a lot of little events like that led up to after I got out of the Army. I worked in manufacturing and warehouses, and I just thought, this is what I'm qualified to do, but I don't like this at all. By its very nature, manufacturing is not conducive to creativity.
Yeah.
Now it is if you're a problem solver. It can be. But when you have managers that don't want to be creative in solving problems, just do it like we've always done it, well, then you've got nothing to keep you coming back. And so, I started doing 3 or 4 years ago, I guess. I started right at almost 4. I started doing voice acting, kind of getting out there and doing some commercials and whatnot, and it's grown. And last year, I finally left the factory.
There's so many diverse lifestyles I've found in the Army. There's so many different types of individuals in each unit. Can you kind of talk about the complexities of that and how there really is great art that can stem from being in a military career? Do you feel like the military kind of suppresses that in a lot of ways?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, the mission of the Army or the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, Coast Guard. Fight and win the nation's wars.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a good painter. Let's win this one. But at the same time, in order to just thrive, you need, I think you need creative outlets if you have a creative bone in your body or whatever. But it's definitely suppressed, sort of. Oh, don't think outside the box.
Right.
We've got this problem. Trust me, it's been tried before. All the cliches.
Yeah.
That is just what lazy people say when they don't want to try and figure something out.
Right.
And then, it's definitely not conducive to creativity.
Yeah, I find that interesting because special operations is different, right? Like, there's definitely creativity is kind of almost induced, in the model. It's very much an outside-the-box type of thought process with special operations guys. I've typically noticed, not to hit on the mainline troops, but typically noticed that more creativity stems from the special operations world because they're very much taught the individual model of think outside the box, figure things out. And, I realize you can't do that in the mainline army because you got a lot of dumb grunts too. You got a lot that, where you kind of have to line things up and you're dealing with a lot of young kids. But it is at times almost anti-conducive to winning wars in that you get stuck behind all this bureaucracy of a model, right? And then it takes like one Medal of Honor type of, guy like a Audie Murphy or somebody thinking out, you know what? I'm going to go take that nest because orders are taking way too long, Exactly. I need to get up there and get after it. And sometimes it's that guy, that creative, mind, and Audie obviously went on to act and but he, it takes that kind of creative mind to think outside the box and go, man, you know what? I know the problem. Point A to point B, kill the enemy and go home. Flags waving, and we got ourselves a parade, So anyways, within that creative model, I found like guys like you, effective leaders, guys who are in those spots are often creative, I've found, because you do think outside the box. You're thinking, okay, how do I give my men a little bit more rest, right? Like, how do I put my men in a place where they can succeed instead of worrying about yourself? And, that might all stem from selflessness, which you learned growing up. Can you talk about, I don't really know where that question was going other than I love the idea.
To hear the sound of Tim K's voice.
That was exactly it. There you go. But I admire your background. I admire, your mother, your father, and the way they were raised. Can you talk about how your father, pushed you into creativity? And I talked a little bit about Jesse with that, but obviously it's a little different for you because you waited a little while before you kind of got into it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. My dad was sort of your typical Southern redneck. He thought, if you better not cry. Don't be a sissy. And this was in his younger days. You shouldn't appreciate. If you sit out there and admire a sunset, there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean? If you're like, wow, that's beautiful. What's wrong with that guy? It was like I'm too manly to appreciate beauty in any form.
Right. Yeah.
Besides the ladies, what I mean? Just like, I think you should be able to, read a Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats and be like, man, I've thought that too. I've kind of just wanted to get away from it all and just fly away like a bird. You know what I mean? And I think that's great. Yeah. And my dad was like that. Well, then, he started reading the Bible and he, got saved, and that kind of changed his tune where he was like, man, if Lord made all this stuff, well, he must be kind of an artist himself. So, and so he would point me to King David in the Bible. He called him the sweet psalmist of Israel. He wrote psalms. He apparently could play musical instruments very well. But he was also a fierce warrior, slew a lot of bad people. And my dad would point to him and say, it's okay to be creative and also be good at your job, pursue, military or whatever you are doing. And he kind of made it okay for a little Southern boy to think something's beautiful or a poem is beautiful or, whatever.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, and that definitely translated into what you're doing now. For those of you that haven't heard, is it J.C. Jacobson audio?
Yeah, so that's one of the stage names, you might say. I mean, I'm not on stage. I'm on behind the mic, but
right.
a stage name that I use for some stuff.
And that's Facebook.
Yeah, JC Jacobson Audio.
And then what's your Instagram again?
Jake Phillips, which is my name, 116.
Jake Phillips 116. So the reason I bring that up is because I would love for some of the listeners to go there and check it out, because Jake is a super talented voice artist who does a lot of who has his own podcast. It's very good. And he has a lot of local talent on, as well as people that are, from some other areas. He's had myself on. He's had some other talented voice artists. I'm not quite sure why he had me on, but
well, you knocked old Edgar Allan Poe out of the park. So.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love to read, and I love to read for audio, so it's pretty awesome to get to kind of step into his world and get to do some of that, because obviously in college I went after a digital media degree, so I had some sound experience, but just seeing the way that he conducted himself in that environment was really cool. So Jake, can you talk a little bit about the podcast and what the idea stemmed from?
Yeah, so it's called The Cultured Bumpkin, and I do basically readings in classic literature. So I love the classics. I love literature that's withstood the test of time, and people are still reading after 100 years, 150 years, that kind of thing. Looking around, it's hard to find people that appreciate that and that have made it available, let's say on YouTube or something. No, I did one of my favorite stories is The Ransom of Red Chief by O. Henry, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I went on YouTube, and someone had apparently put it into the robot computer, so it was like, we were down south in Alabama. It was awful. I mean, the story was there, but it wasn't any fun to listen to. So I thought, well, shoot, I'll just do a podcast where I read some of my favorite stories and maybe introduce people to other local artists / more obscure people from literature.
Yeah.
Focuses mostly on American, but I think there wouldn't be American literature if it weren't for the British and things like that. So I'll do an occasional foreign literature piece, and so it's a lot of fun. So I just read, I'll kind of say, hey, this is Edgar Allan Poe, here's when he lived, here's what he did, here's whatever, a little intro,
right.
and then give them an audible quality reading of a poem or a short story or an excerpt.
And how much do you enjoy doing that? How much is that enlivening for you?
I love that. I think it's good to always have something that you love to do and that you do not because you're making money at it. So this is my hobby. As far as I think anything can become a chore. Something you love can become a chore if you're not careful. And you see that in, let's say, pro sports. There might be someone making millions of dollars and they'll walk away just because it's not fun anymore. Man, that must have been a journey to go from, this is my favorite thing to ever do. Oh, by the way, you're going to get millions of dollars to do it. And I don't want to do it. It sucks. So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
So I love taking a script and putting my take on it, maybe getting feedback, changing a little bit. Okay, yeah, let's go more. And then the podcast is it's a nice outlet for me within the creative job that I'm in. It's an outlet for me to continue to be creative on my own for free, basically. That's why I just like that.
I think that you've defied a lot of stereotypes, my man. There is that stereotype of being a Southern gentleman and not partaking in the arts, right? And I think people don't get that. I really want to talk about that with you because I love the idea of a Renaissance man. I think those are some of the toughest, hardest dudes that you could ever possibly meet or be around. The George Washingtons, the Thomas Jeffersons, the inventors, the artists, the writers, the cooks. I mean, I think Thomas Jefferson knew like 5 or 6 languages, something like that, maybe more. But that was common back then, and these are guys who are wearing powdered wigs, with like
little tight knickerbockers.
Yes, but they would have kicked that booty all over the place, George Washington had like how many horses shot out from under him? Like
several.
So what is it about being the Renaissance man, kind of not defying that stereotype of like, oh, well, that's super soft or fruity if you're reading, from, poetry or doing those things. What is it about, defying that stereotype for you? How important has that been for you?
For me, it's not so much like, I want to be a Renaissance man, and so I'm gonna. Hey everybody, I'm a Renaissance man.
Hey everybody, I am one. Look at me.
It's in my case, it's more, bro. If you think that, you just go on and think. I don't care what you think.
Right.
I know what I like, and I think when you kind of
secure within yourself,
you're secure in yourself and what you believe and what you how you feel about others. You know, I grew up in Mississippi where we've had some pretty awful race relations in our history. If anyone has heard, if you've been alive in the past 60 years for any amount of time, you know that in Mississippi, we've had some pretty terrible things happen. And for those people overseas listening, Mississippi is one of the, you look up civil rights movement, you'll see Mississippi's name come up as far as incidents that happen. So a bad place racially, and yet my dad, after he started reading the Bible and saw, you know, that God created man in his own image, and, you know, he created and redeemed man, that sort of thing, that he brought this little white boy up and my brothers, and he said, if I ever see you treating somebody else different because of what they look like, what color their skin is, I'm gonna whoop you. Right? Imagine,
brought down the hammer.
Right. I mean, imagine if most little white boys had a dad like that.
Oh yeah.
You would still have your race baiters that, you know, try to stir stuff up, but man, it would be a different place.
Definitely.
And I think when you see that, you know, you're no better than someone else, you got the same problems, you bleed the same color, you know, it's like so many things are the same. That gives a security to who you are. Right. I think when you know who you are, you don't really care what other people think. And then I think if you're, Booker T. Washington said there's as much dignity in plowing a field as in writing a poem. And I think that's another Renaissance man, by the way.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely.
Talk about overcoming adversity. That's man.
Yeah. Him and George Washington Carver.
Yep.
Both incredible.
Yeah, I think if you just don't care what people think and you do what interests you and you look out for, you know, you're thoughtful of others, and I think you find yourself having a wide interest, you know, and if you say, you know, if you're in a social setting or something, if let's say, okay, I like football and I like, you know, whatever. And if women, and you know, if someone has an interest outside of that, then I don't want to talk to them. Yeah. Well, then you're not going to be very well-rounded. So, you know, I think it can stem from just a genuine interest in others. You go up to someone, hey man, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you like doing? Did you go to college? You know, trade? What? Tell me your story. And I think people open up when they see that, oh, he's not a salesman trying to sell me something. He's actually interested. And people will tell you some pretty amazing things, and you can learn from everybody. And even if it's how not to do something, but you can learn from everybody. And I think when you just show a genuine interest in others, it kind of forces you into a state of renaissance where you're you know, oh, Olympic lifting, yeah, that's awesome, dude. You basket weave, you know. I talked to a guy on my podcast who's from has Gullah heritage, so the islands off of South Carolina. And he was telling me about the how they fish and how they do basket weaving from the Gullah rushes in the native marshes there. And that's so interesting. Yeah. And I think just genuine interest in others helps.
You know, that's interesting because Jesse and I yesterday, your brother, were talking about empathy and how important empathy is in storytelling. We talked about this one moment where we were with Doc Hazard. You know, and you know Doc Hazard very well. But we were sitting there, and, you know, I was doing a project on him, still yet to be released. I'm very excited about. And we're sitting there, and we having this one moment where it's like Jesse's cramped in the back of my car. You know, he's like 6'6". He's a rather large man. And he's cramped up in the back of my car, and Doc is talking about how proud he is of his son. This is a World War II legend. And he's talking about that element of his son, and then that connects all the humanity with the project, right? That sense of storytelling being the whole life, not just being, well, what'd you do in combat, Doc? Being also about his son and how proud he was. And he hadn't really talked about his son the whole time up until that moment. And he started talking about him and he started getting teary-eyed. And Jesse and I were like fountains, we're sitting there and there's just silence, man. And it was the most beautiful silence. And Jesse didn't talk about his leg being cramped up, his discs, messed up in his back. You just dead still. And you're just listening to a legend. And you realize in that moment, you'll never get that moment back. That is what it is. But it's that sense of empathy in the moment and caring, truly caring, about the story. I think is so powerful. So I'm glad you mentioned that about, being a Renaissance man. I didn't think about the empathy track, that part of it. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
So off of that, is empathy important in the podcast and what you're doing as far as, talking when you have a guest on, how important is that when you're speaking with somebody and telling their story or having them read?
I think it's obviously important just because if for no other reason, you want them to have a chance to have a platform to talk about themselves or to, say something interesting to the audience. If I say everything because I think they're so cool, they've got nothing to say. And right. Some people they're natural performers and they can talk their way out of anything and make it interesting. But a lot of people, especially authors, authors there's a reason why they're writing is because they don't like talking in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And so for an author, let's say, and I'm talking like your stereotypical author, there's plenty of authors that are
a little
great.
Reclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I say that because I kind of have to fight that. I'm a little introverted naturally. I kind of have to say, okay, shake it off. Let's my wife is extremely extroverted and she kind of helps me. Okay, stop, get out, get out of your chair, get off of your easy chair, put your book down, let's go do something. So I need that and that's good to have.
That's cool.
So yeah,
we're talking about the Renaissance, about empathy and being on a podcast and hosting and having other guests on.
Yeah, so I think it's important. If for no other reason, you're not taking their ammunition from them.
Yeah,
you're letting them say something. I think that's and then also it gives a wide variety. You're possibly being the empathy for someone else that they wouldn't have done that, and yet here you are, and they're listening, and now you're opening up some subject matter that they wouldn't have, the listener, let's say, wouldn't have gone out to get for themselves maybe. And now they're interested because of the question you asked. So you can kind of help other people get out of their bubble and, think about someone else for a change, what makes them tick and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. And, when you were talking about that through the course, I was thinking about your growth and stepping out into this world. I remember having these discussions about like, bro, why are you working in manufacturing? Do you remember me like asking you about that?
Yeah.
I literally remember thinking, dude, this guy's an artist. Like, I feel it. I feel it when I'm around him. I feel it when we're sitting down. We're talking about Walt Whitman or Ernest Hemingway or, I'm just naming the most famous people that people know right now. But just, those types of people. And we had these very rich discussions. And I'm like, this guy does not belong in manufacturing. And that's not to say you can't do that. That's fine. If that's your course and that's your path, take it. But for me, I just remember asking, like, are you really happy doing this? Like, dude, you should strive.
No.
No. What finally made you make that jump, man? Because there are a lot of entrepreneurs or people, future entrepreneurs are going to be listening to this. A lot of people sitting on their couch, veterans guys, veterans who've just gotten out. Dude, they might be in a hard place. They might have that, proverbial or literal, gun to the head, be in a hard spot. Kind of wondering, how do I get out and do it? Oh, well, Rudy did it because he's a great actor. He's just naturally talented and beautiful. And that's not a good example to take from because
true,
don't do that. Don't compare yourself to him. And then Nate, obviously stepping out and, I don't know if you know much of his story, but, he's sleeping in his car before he joined the Green Berets, man. Sleeping in his car in Hollywood trying to get gigs, man. He was working as, like, waterboat taxi guy, like, doing scooter stuff, like bringing scooters back to the stations in Hollywood.
So he's the one responsible for those deadgum birds that
He
did not know that about him.
No, we can't be friends. But he had all these menial jobs and like he learned how to get up from there, and it took him a while. How did you decide to step out on your own, and what was the decision-making process for that?
Well, I can tell you exactly the point. I think I'd been entertaining the idea of stepping away for months. And obviously, I've got a wonderful wife and 3 little kids.
So yeah, shout out to Mary Elizabeth and the wonderful kids, because they're awesome.
They're so much fun, and I would, my job is to provide for them, even if I have to do it in a way that I don't just love.
Yeah,
and I really see that as my duty. I'm gonna make sure those kids are diapered and fed. And got the peanut butter sandwiches or whatever, regardless of if like, oh, I am loving this. I'm gonna. That's number one. But in my case, my wife Mary Elizabeth is extremely. She understands me. She's nothing like me. She's my opposite. Mm-hmm. She's not creative. Sorry, honey. She's extremely extroverted.
Yes.
She's energized by large groups of people, whereas I am not. I've got like if there's a large, if you ever see me at a large gathering of a social event, you'll see me and I'll probably talk to the same person or two for a long time rather than like, hey, how you doing, buddy? How you doing?
Yeah, brother.
I don't talk to 50. I'll talk to 2 or 3, and then I'll be out on the balcony just looking at the stars.
It's true. It's true. I've seen it. Yeah.
And anyway, so she was so supportive, and she's the one that was saying, sweetie, you're dying. Like, you're dying.
Dying inside.
And I'm just so blessed to have that kind of support, because I wouldn't have left if it weren't for her. Honestly, I would have said, well, I need to, bring in as much money as possible. I'm not going to be rolling any dice as far as the career goes. And she was like, no, you need to be doing this.
That's really cool.
And, you need to, we need to roll the dice together. And I was like,
wow.
All right. So obviously that's the main thing. Well, then it became, okay, so I'm going to quit soon. And I don't know. I don't know the exact time to go on and turn in my notice. And I was talking to a guy, and he was one of the maintenance guys at this facility, country bumpkin redneck. If you weren't from this area, you probably wouldn't understand him talk. And
I've run into a few of those.
But also the best maintenance man in the whole place, and he could fix anything.
Yeah. And
I was kind of talking. He's just a wise man. And I was telling him, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And at some point, I'm going to step away. I just don't know when it is. He looked at me and he went, well, sometime you're just going to have to go on and make the plunge. And I was like, well, yeah, what do you mean? And he went, well, they're always going to give you just enough to keep coming back. And I was like, man, that would be funny if it weren't so true. And he
curled up in the fetal position in your office and began to cry.
Well, no, it was that day. I went home and I said, sweetie, I think it's time.
Wow.
And she said, let's do it.
Man.
And then the next time I got a dirty look in the hall, I said, hey, I quit. And then, that was kind of the catalyst to getting out of there. And then addressing the next point, if anyone is at the point where, one of those gun to the head moments, man, somebody loves you. You don't do that. That's a bad idea. Your problems don't go away. They'll get worse if you go out like that. All right. Someone loves you. And whether you believe it or not, I believe Jesus loves you. He's there for you. And trust him. There's so many veterans that have been through what you've been through. There's nothing you've gone through that someone else hasn't been through too. Don't think, well, no one, I don't want to bug anybody. Don't think like that's ridiculous. Yeah. Reach out to someone. I guarantee you there's plenty of people out there. If you reach out like, hey man, I'm hurting. You got to help me. Man, they'll drop what they're doing.
I'm glad you said that too, because man, I've been at the bottom of the barrel, I'm facing a divorce and I just lost my wife in a very painful way. And, I felt like I didn't feel like quitting life, but I remember praying to the Lord sometimes, like, Lord, just take me. Like, please, I don't want to be here. Just that sadness, infinite sadness where you feel like you're in the hole. And you know what? Extended off of that, man, the Veterans Project.
Nice.
Never had any desire to pick up a camera. And suddenly I'm like, I want to learn art because I want to not focus on myself.
Yeah.
And at the end of that selflessness and like finding storytelling, I found my happiest points. I found my greatest choice. It's amazing how, the Bible talks a lot about that, about selflessness and how that's where, our true joy is. And so I think the model for me was learning in that way. What about being in art is therapeutic to you? Or is it therapeutic? Is it just something you just enjoy and, as a hobby and you're making it into a job? Or is it therapeutic to you? Do you find it to be that way?
Yeah, it definitely is therapeutic in a way. It's like no one can tell if you're painting a picture. And I like painting. I'm not good, but I like to do it. No one can say, the thing about art is no one can say, hey, you did that wrong. You know what I mean?
True.
If you're setting the tension on your M1 Abrams road wheels, you can do that wrong. Whereas,
and he knows about that.
if you are painting a picture of a landscape, it might look like crap, but no, I didn't do it wrong. That's exactly how I want it to look.
Right.
And there's that aspect of freedom that no, I like it like this, so you can buzz on out of here. And I think there's it builds freedom in two ways, kind of. Sort of an independence of kind of what I like, but also, hey, at some point as an artist, and you've experienced this, the better you get at something, more successful you get, the more people are going to say, the more you'll come across people that are like, oh, well, that sucks. Oh, it's black and white portraits. They're too grainy. Oh, it's crap like that. And that means they're jealous and they've never done anything in their life.
Right.
The people that would actually have good feedback for you, if they were genuinely worried about you, would pull you into a private area and be like, hey, this is not going to work for you. And it would be genuine. Bro. What's that?
Hey, bro, I want to privately tell you that this is garbage.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's something, I'm glad you mentioned that, because art is subjective in a lot of ways. And there is obviously that term, that idea, when you're watching somebody that, like, you really can't judge somebody's art per se, obviously, but as you get into the market, man, you know that there are varying opinions and like ideas of how you're doing something, right? Like, you as a voiceover artist, well, we need you to read this Casey Masterpiece commercial like a country bumpkin. You're not gonna be like, hello, I'm here for Casey Masterpiece. Yeah. Will you enjoy this fine sauce on your sausages and rib racks? If you do that, you're going to get fired. Like, what is it? So when you step into
Hello there. Do you like sausages?
Do you like sausages? We're just going to do British accents for the rest of the time. But, what is it about that within the art that becomes all of a sudden you having to fulfill requests, right? Like, you can't per se suck at it. Although I guess you could too, either way. But what about it? Is it harder when you get in the space where you're doing it for actual work? Do you ever find yourself burn out in that space, or you kind of need a recharge?
I think the only thing, yes, I do feel burnout from time to time. I don't think that you can live on planet Earth and not feel burnt out at some point, and you just have to deal with that. I think you could be a billionaire and that'll have its own problems. You could be, this beach is so hot and the sun's so hot and the sand's so white, it's blinding my eyes.
Barbados is tough this time of year.
Right. And this Mai Tai is just, the ice is melting. You can, there's people are going to find stuff to complain about, and you can too.
Right.
Or you could say, I am on a white beach and I've got a Mai Tai with melty ice and I am living it up right now. Mm-hmm. And you can look on the bright side. But what was the question? That was around the doghouse way of.
No, the question was what, within the work. Burnout.
Yeah. So I think what will kind of trigger that is when someone gives bad direction and then, or kind of minimal direction. Like they'll, let's say so I do a lot of podcast intros and I'll do all kind of stuff. So someone, the content creator for the commercial or whatever, will say, I think I want it like this. And you give them exactly what they want, and not in like a name dropping way. And so I won't drop the names, but I've worked in, with guys that were in Lord of the Rings, one of the guys for the Transformers films. Mm-hmm. Like, I can take direction. Okay. I wouldn't be working with them if I couldn't.
Right.
And so when I give you exactly what you asked for, and then you're like, no, well, then that would trigger burnout on a kind of an accelerated
right.
Yeah. But it's not really burnout. It's more like, what's wrong with you, man? Come on.
Yeah. Give you exactly what you wanted.
Tell me what you want. You don't even know what you want.
Right.
So, and that's just that's more my problem. That's not really burnout. That's just frustration with the client that doesn't know what they want. And then I think when you get, let's say, a day of 2 or 3 of those where you're doing redos 2 or 3 times on 2 or 3 projects. By the end of the day, you're like, good gosh, I just need to, go whatever.
Yeah.
So, but in my case, it's not extended burn. I really do like doing this. And, if I do have a bad day, I'll just I like reading, like Chronicles of Narnia, go away to another world. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, go play with the kids or just do something that's not necessarily creative. Just get away. And then I'll be fine.
Yeah, that's funny. Is you do have your definite outlets outside of creativity. You do have your outlets. I mean, you have your family. That's like if that's not enough of an outlet, then I don't know what is. I've met your kids, and they're energetic, and they are plenty of an outlet.
Yeah.
Like I think that is interesting though, because you kind of almost assume within this vein that when you love something like photography or writing or different things like that, like. Oh, when you're passionate about something, you never get burned out. No, that's not true. You have to take special, I think personality types also play into that too. Some people get more easily burnt out than others. And that comes with the high highs and the low lows of being an extrovert. But for you, what has been the key to staving off burnout? Has it been stepping outside of those circles and getting involved with your family and, maybe going out to a coffee shop and reading or, what keeps you fresh within your work?
Well, I think, ultimately it was getting away from manufacturing in my case, which that was like, I'm a hard worker, so I can do, I think if you got good, fun people around you, then you can enjoy almost anything. You can dig a ditch out in the hot sun, and if you got a couple guys there joking around with you, you're going to have fun. And yeah, what's so bad?
Yeah.
I had fun out there. And so for me, it was, I was burnt out by 9 o'clock every day.
Yeah.
In a factory.
Wow. You mean 9 a.m.?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
So it's kind of like, show up to 7, got my coffee, and then by 9, it's just like, I have had it with this place. Wow. And then, man, that's tough. Whereas I think if you're doing something, that was an indicator to me that I'm just never going to thrive here.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about it, they doubled my pay. Would it be worth it? No, I still wouldn't like it. You know what I mean? Then it starts getting like, well, what in the world are you doing here? Go find something you do like. You only got one chance at life.
That's true.
I don't want to spend it miserable for 10 hours a day. There are other ways to provide for the minions than this is America, where I live anyway. Yeah. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody everywhere, but in America, you're free to say, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
But how hard is it with a family to kind of step outside of that? You did have that endorsement of Mary Elizabeth, but it was probably still tough with the responsibility on your shoulders to step outside, right?
Exactly. And, and on the contrary, I did not think, oh, you're single. That meant a lot to me that you gave me that encouragement. Because sometimes I think in anyone sort of charting a new course is gonna have some thoughts of, am I crazy? Am I crazy right now?
Yeah.
Am I crazy that I want to give up the security of a clock punching job for the unknown of this thing that I might like a lot better?
Bro, I get sponsorships now pretty regularly, and it happens to me every day still.
Right. And I don't know if you'll ever get out of that. And that's one of the kind of wild and free wind in your hair moments is like, I don't know how we're doing this.
Let that top down and let that convertible fly, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I read the Bible every morning, and I've been reading through about how Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. And you talk about going into an unknown. They had security in slavery. Later, they even mentioned, well, we had, nice food back there. And going out into the wilderness and the unknown, and that's kind of how it feels. It's sort of like, man, last week was fantastic. I made so much money, and then like I have not gotten a single job in 3 days. Okay, I don't know where it's. You know what I mean? So there's always that I don't know. And obviously, I don't want to make it sound like I think manufacturing or going to a job is bad. Because
no, not at all.
You wouldn't have. If you didn't have restaurant workers, you couldn't go out to eat for lunch.
Shout out to Mike Rowe for JobWorks and like all those programs. Man.
Yes,
you need
I love that.
I
love how he's brought the dignity to working with your hands, working hard.
Yeah,
I love that.
Nowadays, you make a lot more money doing those kind of things.
And, Yeah, I tell my little brothers, as they're coming up into high school and college age, like don't. If you want to go to college, fine, but don't think that's the only way that you'll ever be successful.
Right.
Go down here to the community college, get a welding certificate, and you're going to be probably debt free and making a lot more than your buddies that are working wherever else, or working at a fast food restaurant with their degree.
And you can go own your own company and be off in Aruba, 3 weeks out of the year or whatever, going out and chilling out and having a good time on the beach, while your other buddies are stuck in that 9-to-5 office job and like, you get 1 week paid or else, it's like, so there's like this common misconception now that you have to do it that way. But, we're not saying step off into art. We all need that. Obviously, there are going to be people that can do that. And I do not like this whole dream philosophy nowadays that we have in the society where it's like, everybody should just live their dreams, and like everybody's outside being unicorns. We need those people who are in those manufacturing jobs because that's what extended the back of America. That's what made us what we are as a country, those manufacturing jobs. So definitely not saying anything negative against those guys. But if you believe in what you have and your passion extends into something like Jake's voice acting.
Yeah.
How do you push into that? How does that happen?
I think you need to be tethered to reality, whatever you do, whether you're an artist or not. And I think artists are notorious for not being tethered to reality. And so I think if you got your feet on the old, planet Earth firmly, then go for something as long as you're thinking straight and not being, thinking in falsehoods and making decisions on something that's not really true. I think it's good I think everyone's different. If you have a way, the book of Proverbs, one of the greatest books on personal development anywhere at any time in history, it says, ponder the path of thy feet and let all thy ways be established. If you are going to make a transition after much thought, make a plan, write it down. Say, hey, I'm not just going to have a bad day at work and then say, you can all suck it. And then the next day, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. 'Cause I'm not, don't do it like that.
Everybody's kind of probably had one of those moments.
Right. As those bad days start to stack up, channel that angst into something constructive, which is have a plan for getting out of there and do something that you do like. And it might be another 9-to-5 in another field. Maybe, you're good. You want to go back to school, be a counselor or a PT or maybe physical therapist. Maybe, I don't know. Everybody's different. And what I like, the next guy or girl's not going to like necessarily. But
and that's great.
But and it has to be that way. If we were all the same, we would be like little lemmings just jumping off a cliff to our death.
No job market.
no job market. Yeah. They're all in the sea. But have a plan for that.
What are the goals for Jake Phillips and like what he's extending off into? What do you want to do with this moving into the future? Like maybe some short-term and some long-term goals.
Okay. I would say short-term and long-term together. Main goal, provide for my family in a creative way. That's the main thing. I'm not looking for fame and riches. I just want to lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. I want to raise my kids to be great citizens, teach them the Bible, obey the law, raise good people, be thoughtful of others. That's the main thing. Short term is just keep growing the business, and I've lately gotten into a lot of different genres, and by that I mean audio dramas, animations, a lot of commercials, but video games. I'm getting into video games.
That's cool.
Documentaries. I just did a documentary I'm excited about, and working on another one. And then I do audiobooks also. So a lot of different genres within voice acting. And then one of my goals, I want to be in a Pixar movie.
That's freaking cool.
And it's interesting that will it ever happen? I don't know. And I don't mean the guy on the marquee. Those are always going to be leading A-list celebrities.
Right.
And there's nothing to do about it, but there are voices to be had. There are voices in those things that you don't know the guy's face or the girl's face.
Right.
You're just, they need other voice actors too. And that's what I want to do. And I wrote that down. I wrote down that goal in January. And sometimes you can have I'm not there yet, but I can see progress. within a month, still not in a Pixar movie, but I was in.
I thought you were going to say you were getting a role.
No. I was in a project with a guy that has been in about 15 of them.
Wow.
You know, a minor actor. He's these little characters, but I was in a project with him where I was a American, a Southern guy, and a British guy, and then both of those characters interacted with his character.
Wow.
And so it's like, you know, the degrees of separation.
6 degrees of separation.
Just got
You're
closer.
there. Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I'm getting there. I can see the progress.
Yeah.
So
Kevin Bacon. Yep.
So that's kind of my goal. I want to do that.
That's awesome. You know, you talked about, you hit on something within the middle of that talk that I really wanted to point out, which is the expansiveness of your operations, right? Like so as an artist, I don't often know this, but sometimes I shoot weddings.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. But you know, within the vein of what I do, it's not. I think people just assume that like once you get sponsorships, like you're successful and all that. And very often I'll find myself just taking these jobs where it's like, oh, I want to expand my art. I want to remember what it was like to shoot this. It's important not to cut yourself off, right? Like within that art. Can you talk about that? About like operation? You know, maybe specifically you don't want to read for video games, or you don't want to read for, you know, the latest documentary, but that's part of it, right? Like it's sometimes taking jobs that, you know, within your art that you want to do that you don't particularly love, right? Is that part of it?
Part of it. But also I think I've gotten to the point that going back to the wide range of interests on just stuff in general, that can translate over into your work. So I enjoy a video game character. I've got one right now. I'm a Spanish sailor.
Oh, cool.
I'm about to do later on today.
Wow.
So I'll go watch a bunch of Antonio Banderas videos and then get in the booth and record it. So that's how that works. So yeah, I think
That's amazing.
part of it is just, and for me, it's not the genre that I don't like necessarily, or I get bored with. It might be this is a product that is boring to me, but I'm still going to have fun with it. So I don't know. With such a wide range of possible products within voice acting, I don't get bored very often. I do sometimes, but not often.
So you've got almost an optimistic viewpoint of that within the art. Is like, oh, I'm not having to do video games. Like I'm getting to do video games.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that's super fun. I think every person has done a impression of someone at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what we do. You know, entertaining each other is like, oh yeah. And then he was like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
You give him Lloyd Christmas from Dumb and Dumber. I don't know. Or Pat's heads are falling off. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you got a wide range, and then you can. And if I ever. Like lately, I kind of got burnout on audiobooks. Like, man, there's so much technical editing that goes into that because I do the production too. It's like, I'm just going to kind of cool it on the audiobooks for a little bit and just do commercials. So I've been doing more commercials and less audiobooks. And yeah, I'll do another audiobook when I'm ready, you know.
That's awesome, man. Jake, you know, your career obviously has been pretty expansive. You've done a lot with your life, you know, from growing up, you know, in, you know, kind of rural Mississippi. Not super rural. You're pretty close to Starkville. But, you know, rural as in the broader terms of the world, you know, like, and you joined the Army, became an officer, went the officer route.
That's right.
You know, I just wanted to hit on the military career just a little bit, obviously. What led you to that officer route? What brought you there?
I think I'd been entertaining the idea of the military. My dad, being from a big family, my dad said, you know, hey, if you want to go to college, you need to pay for it. I will help all I can, but just, I can't, you know, I'm not going to be able to just write a check. You're going to have to study hard and you're going to have to whatever. So that was kind of how I wanted to pay for college. And it worked out. You know, I got a ROTC scholarship to Mississippi State. Yeah, so that was, but I think the catalyst for that was 9/11. I'd been entertaining the idea, and I think there's been, I mean, so many guys and gals all over the world that made a decision that day, and I was one of them. I was like, yeah, I think I want to join the military because I love this place. Yeah, you know, it's not that I hate other people. I love this place, and that's why I want to do it. So
it's okay to love your country, by the way.
It is okay. It is a-okay.
Yeah. What and within that time, what do you think was your most rewarding part of your career of being an officer, you know, in a line unit? It was a line unit. What was your most rewarding? What was the most rewarding part of?
I think the part I like the best I think I would speak for just about anyone is the people. Some of the activities you do are boring or awful or they suck or whatever, but the people, that's what I like. I still have those friendships from my time. That was the best part. And then also just being right out of college, and if you're now I was no little Lieutenant Patton or anything. I was not a great, never going to be a general kind of a guy. But I think if you're try to be thoughtful, try to do the right thing, and listen to your NCOs that have been around a lot longer than you have, and don't show up thinking that you know what you're doing already, because you don't. Listen to wisdom, then I think you'll have a lot to take away. And so I was forced into situations where I had to mature quickly. Yeah. And it makes you you say, like, man, you're kind of in charge of these people, but you don't know what you're doing, so you're going to have to listen to wise counsel and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, for me, like, I think the most valuable part of my career within the Army was, deploying. I loved going to Iraq because I felt like for the first time I had some value there. In garrison, I just didn't feel like I was really doing anything. Yeah. And obviously I was Texas National Guard, so I was deployed in the middle of my, college career playing baseball. So that was a little bit of a shock to the system. But, what was to you, did you enjoy deploying overseas? Did you enjoy that, that part of finally actually getting boots on the ground and being over there, or no?
I think I liked it in the sense that I felt like I was doing what I'd trained to do and what I'd signed up to do. Right. I was over there. Now, I never got into, Black Hawk Down type of situations or the...
Most of us did not.
A lot of the guys that you've had on the podcast or in the project, I don't know what they went through. No idea what that was like. Right. But it was rewarding in the way that, it was like, again, in the Bible, it says, we are faithful servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. So, you kind of, you went and did your duty. Yeah. It was rewarding in that way. I didn't really like it. Yeah. Just because, I didn't like my leadership. That
makes it difficult.
They were polishing their oak leaves, that kind of thing. And, right. And if we're being honest, each other's knobs.
I'm so glad you said knobs in this podcast. I think that might be the first knobs I've gotten.
Yeah, from an American.
Yeah. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, and it was just so much selfishness in a lot of ways, and I didn't like that at all. And being, I know it's like that.
Bronze stars, bro.
No, that's exactly what happened.
Oh, I remember.
We lined up all the officers in the group. All right, now this is going to make some folks mad.
Don't care.
I was mad I was honestly mad when it happened. Yeah. I'm used to seeing a man like that came back from war with one arm and he's got a V on there. Mm-hmm. The Bronze Star is supposed to mean something. We didn't do a whole lot over there, and all the officers and the senior NCOs, I think first sergeants got them as well. But the only officer that didn't get a Bronze Star, got like a MSM, Meritorious Service Medal or something. Right. He's the only one that didn't get it, and I know for a fact because he and our XO got in a fight right before they wrote all the medals. And I just saw how petty that was. It's like, this is ridiculous.
And talk that could politics. Very realistically change your career.
Yeah. And it was like, so y'all had a difference of opinion. And the S2 was right, by the way. It was the guy that didn't get the Bronze Star. The fact, I'll say, the fact that we're giving out Bronze Stars for what we did is ridiculous to me. An end of tour award, I don't have a problem with the idea of that. It shouldn't be a Bronze Star. Let that be for somebody that did something special. Even if it wasn't in combat, you ought to have done something kind of like, wow, good job. Yeah. And when you give everybody a trophy like that doesn't, it takes away the value for the guys that did lose a leg, let's say. Yeah. The girls that did, go blind from an IED. I don't know. Right.
Participation culture in the United States Army in a mainline combat unit. Crazy.
Yeah. Do it down at the T-ball or the soccer field. Don't do it in combat.
Don't even do it there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the culture though, right? Like, and it's propagated itself into a mainline unit. Think about how crazy that is for a second. And you know what? If you're listening out there and you're like, well, I got a Bronze Star for and I think that's offensive. Dude, I don't care.
Yeah, and I'm not speaking for anyone else's Bronze Star.
Right.
I'm speaking for mine.
Right, yeah.
I think it's ridiculous.
I was in the same kind of unit, bro.
Yeah.
We all line up at the end, and there are guys getting, and I don't care who listens to this podcast, you got a Bronze Star from that tour and where we were at. That's ridiculous. Didn't deserve it. There's no spot for that. I got an RCOM. Are you kidding me, dude? I'm like, my report on my thing for my RCOM, I was like, okay. Cool, dude. Didn't really, did nothing special to deserve that. I never felt like I did. I was a search lead in a specialized detainee operational unit where we would take convoy and, real bad guys out and bring them in. And so I was a search leader. So I would lead these guys, and I supposedly caught 1,000 pieces of contraband or something like that. Ooh, you're doing your job.
Give that man a star.
You get yourself a gold star. Who cares, bro? I was doing my job. For me, when I told I was getting an RCOM, I was like, oh, cool. So those are what, candy now?
Yes, that is.
Yes, it is. We're going to give it to you. An RCOM, in World War II, was did you lose 3 fingers?
Yeah. How many bunks you take out, kid?
Yeah. That's, actually.
4.
Well, I went into the talk and I got some coffee for Lieutenant so-and-so. That whole culture has propagated itself in the United States military, which I think is sad. And listen, if you receive the Bronze Star or one of those things, it's not on you. Hey, that's fine. I get it. It happens. But also, the leadership that promotes that kind of thing, you're part of the problem because you are giving guys awards for things that they didn't deserve. You're taking away from the very value of that award. And you're also making it look like some of our older brothers in Vietnam, Korea, and World War II culture didn't do much. And that Bronze Star is a big deal. I don't care if it has a V device on it or not. It's a big deal.
My grandfather was a senior NCO in the Air Force during Vietnam, and he got a Bronze Star for a meritorious Bronze Star. Yeah. But you know what he did? They would fly the planes that had been shot up over to where he was a radar technician, and he had it was I've seen the citation, 100%. There was never a plane down for very long when Grandpa and the gang got on that thing. They had a quick turnaround time. And I was an XO. I appreciate the transportation crews that can turn a truck around fast.
Yeah.
There's nothing. You don't realize how valuable that is until they stay broke.
You're saving lives.
Parts on order. You don't realize how valuable that is. Yes, Grandpa deserved a meritorious Bronze Star.
Absolutely.
And then when I look at mine, I'm like, I have a problem with mine. No, I'm not like who are John Kerry throwing his stuff over the fence. I'm not like that.
Come on, bro.
But it's just I'm not gonna get the Bronze Star license plate unless they start giving them out for free. Then I might.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna pay money to have it on my license plate.
Yeah.
On my vehicle.
I get that totally. And it's very different between the cultures. I think it's very it's kind of awesome. When I talk to a lot of special operations guys, and they're like, I'm like, hey, bro, didn't you get a Purple Heart? I don't see that anywhere. And they're like, oh, enemy marksmanship badge? Nah, I'm good. That whole attitude and ideal, I wish it was more that way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be proud of those things because, in Texas, I know your kid gets free college education if you have a Purple Heart. It's paid for. Awesome. Well-deserved. I had a guy in my unit who was their supply guy, and he was in another unit, and back in 2005, and he had a RPG coming through the window back when they had the hillbilly armor, and it took their female medic's head off, went out the other side, and he got sprayed with all the shrapnel and blood that happened. Part of war, obviously, but when he received Purple Heart, he still had shrapnel marks all over his face. Well deserved. However, when you see the ideals of the special operations guys, where it's oh man, that's just got hit, and it was an unfortunate. Jared Bullock, another guy I covered, ran. I go, bro, what do you say to people when they say you're a hero? And he goes, I say I was really stupid and I drove over an IED. This guy's lost his leg and his arm. He goes, I was dumb. And you're like, bro, no, you weren't. That could happen to anybody, It's but he doesn't care. That's what he truly believes. He doesn't think anything highly of himself because that happened. In fact, he thinks badly of himself because his career ended in special operations because that's what he wanted to do. He lived with that. His brother's still a Green Beret, twin brother.
Wow.
And for me, I think what you're saying is very powerful because, it's just such a culture nowadays of that, deserved. I deserve this. I served.
And one thing I hate about the culture is the like the self-love culture.
Oh, yeah.
That is a license to be a selfish pig in most cases.
Yeah.
I understand, like, you got to take care of yourself to be able to take care of others, and I understand that. But the vast majority of the time that it presents itself in my line of sight is a selfish person that's always been selfish. Now they hear, oh, no, it's totally cool to be a selfish pig because I got to take care of myself. And I think that's not good.
I have a problem with that elitist like kind of mentality where we get like, I see like these priority lists placed in people's stories. It's like me, you. And then it's like, dude, you don't realize, like, I get what the point you're making. Like, you need to take care of yourself. But me does not come number one. Never in my life have I done something for myself where that has led to ultimate joy. The ultimate joy has come off of doing this project of like telling stories and shutting up and listening. And it's not that you can't take care of yourself. You should, obviously. But when that becomes a priority, dude, it's like you're headed to this, you're on the selfish ship headed to Selfish Island, and like that island is very lonely. You're
already marooned on Selfish Island.
You're already marooned. Yeah, that's true. You're already marooned.
I think one of the best ways to get out of a dark mental place, go help somebody.
Dude, agree completely.
You know what I mean? That's one of the best ways to get out of a funk or some kind of the doldrums or whatever you call it. Go help somebody.
Yeah.
Go find somebody that needs some help and help them. It doesn't have to be money. It could be your time. It could be a phone call. Go see how they're doing.
Yeah.
And that, I just think I don't agree with the self-love movement. In some minor points, I suppose, yes. But as a whole, it's generally a license to be selfish. And, I think, look, not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Think about somebody else for a change. And I bet you'll find yourself coming out of that dark place. And that's happened to me a lot of times.
Well, we want our culture to be better, right, too? Like, think about it collectively as a culture if everybody's going around and serving others first. What does that look like? I think it would be beautiful.
Yeah.
What do you typically feel when you're around people that are selfless? I feel a greater sense of love.
Love for, I think it inspires me to pass that kind of thing along.
Yeah.
Like, man, that guy really cared. She really cared about my day. That was sincere.
Yeah.
I need to ask someone, some random cashier or bank teller or barista about their day later on. And I think it has a chain reaction in a positive way.
Well, think about it from our culture in the suicide epidemic, right? How often do you stave off suicide? It's when you ask those questions very often. And it's not going to save everyone. Listen, I had a squad leader, one of my best friends who killed himself, and we were talking once every other day. And, eventually it just got to be too much. And, and he in the end, he wanted to, and that was just the byproduct of that. But very often I found when suicide has been staved off or, I've spoken to somebody and they ended up going and getting help, it was because you were being unselfish. Get on the phone, you call them up, and you say, hey, bro, what's up, man? How are you? I haven't heard from you in a few days. Man, I just want to let you know I love you, dude. I love you. I care about you. Can you tell me about your day? What's going on?
Yeah, let me go pick you up. Let's get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Let's go camping.
Yeah.
Remember when we were, younger, remember we did whatever? Let's go do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we got off on a little bit of a rant on that last track, but for me, that's a little part of being an artist as well, is the empathy side of that, caring about people, loving people.
Yeah.
You want to provide the best product, right, when you're giving back on your voiceovers.
Yeah.
And you continue to do that within your art. And I think that inspires me. It inspires me through the podcast where you give other people a platform.
Thank you.
I love what you do within that. Any last words for us? Can you...
Sounded ominous.
Don't walk out that door.
No, I appreciate your artistic ability and your empathy for others and your thoughtfulness for others. I've seen you have a moment of sorrow when a memory came back up of a buddy that was lost, and that was real, genuine sorrow. And I think it's beautiful because that's, when I go, I would hope that you would have a moment like that about me.
Oh, yeah.
And I just, you're a wonderful person, and I love what you're doing. I'm glad we're friends.
Dude, me too, man.
Yeah, I think this has been fun.
Shout out to the Instagram, man, Facebook, whatever. What are you on? Tell us about it.
I'm not super active.
No, but I want people to be able to at least follow the podcast and all that. So.
Excuse me. On any the Cultured Bumpkin is on any, wherever you get your podcast, you ought to be able to find it. That's my podcast under my stage name, JC Jacobson. I'm also JC Jacobson Audio on Facebook, and then on the old Instagram is just my name, Jake Phillips 116. Yeah, and that's that's the old Instagram.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Jake. It's honestly been a privilege to speak with you about these things, and I know that for a while that I've been friends with you and your brothers for a while now, and just for all you people listening out there, salt of the earth, man. This family, I know Jake would never claim it, but that's what makes them great, is that whole family is salt of the earth type people that you just genuinely feel love from immediately when you walk in the door. I know it's what I would always want my family to feel like. I know that I've been raised very well by amazing parents that have made me feel that way. So it's a privilege. Every time I come back here to Mississippi, man, I feel like this is my home, so it's always a privilege. I tell people Mississippi is one of my favorite places in the world. They're kind
awesome.
of like,
it's good to hear.
It's a very natural reaction, Normally you think about different things, but the reality is Mississippi is awesome. It's actually a really beautiful place if you come here, and it reminds me a lot of Texas. Yeah, I didn't get a shout out to me for not saying one thing about Texas until now.
I'm impressed that you made it this long.
We made it. Well, Jake, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you, Captain Phillips, the other Captain Phillips. I appreciate you. I want to thank you for providing this space for us to do our podcast in. And Jake did the intro for the Veterans Project podcast. So the intro that you were about to hear will be Jake Phillips. Also did my video for me at Sorenex when we were out there covering Brady Cervantes. Shout out to Tatanka. And we had a great time together, man. You are an artist, a true artist in the greatest sense of the word. So thanks for coming on, buddy. Love you.
Absolutely. Love you too.
And don't forget, everyone out there listening, our legacies are the mission.
This has been the Veterans Project Podcast with our founder, Tim Kay. Check us out at www.thevetsproject.com, on Instagram at The Veterans Project, Facebook, The Veterans Project, and Twitter @Project_Veteran.